Do you feel sleepy when you need to be awake? Are you alert when you want to sleep? That is a circadian problem. Modern life has tricked us into thinking we can do anything at any time. Eat late, scroll endlessly under blue-rich light, work past midnight, and not have to pay the price. But your body is keeping score. And when your light exposure, meal timing, social time, and sleep are out of sync with your circadian rhythm, the cost is higher than you think. You are tired for a reason. It's called circadian misalignment. You're not lazy. Your cells are actually confused. And confusion over time can lead to burnout, illness, injury, and accelerated pace of aging. But the good news, circadian alignment is free, and you can choose better. In today's episode of Science and Soul, I'm going to show you exactly how. You ready? I spent a lot of the day looking at and understanding data, so I wanted to share some data with you before we start the show. This amazing community is growing every day. It's a community of folks who are committed to living their life to the fullest potential. But guess what? The data is showing me that we haven't even begun to unlock the full potential of the show, because 70% of you that watch and listen to the show aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing helps us more than you know. You will be notified every single time that we release a new episode, and you can join our thriving global community. Thank you. Let's get into it. I have a question for you. How many of you have time to be sick, and how many of you have time to be injured? I think the answer is probably no one. None of us have time to be sick. None of us have time to be injured. And it really comes down to, how do I design a life to be available? Available for the things that I care about, available to pursue the things that really help me live my values. And the path to that is through circadian health. And this is just one of the rocks, right? There are many rocks, and I'll talk about all of the big influences, right, that are going to move around our ability to kind of show up and be available. But today's topic is circadian health, and hopefully I provide a very compelling and decisive thesis for why you need to deploy circadian health. I'm going to talk about light behavior. I'm going to talk about sleep-wake timing. I'm going to talk about exercise and social time. And I'm going to talk about time-restricted eating. So these are the 4 things that you need to show up every day, illness and injury-free. And they have to do with the timing of things. Timing of light, the timing of your meals, the timing of when you wake and when you sleep, and the timing of when you're social and when you're exercising. And the first step is understanding how to leverage circadian rhythms and this concept of circadian alignment. Because I think we have this assumption in the modern world that we can do whatever we want, whenever we want, right? And modern life is set up like that. We have access to light, artificial light, 24/7, right? We have access to food, essentially 24/7. Right? So we are in a situation where we start to believe that just because we have access, it doesn't have a consequence. But the reality is that accessing food, for example, during the inactive phase of our circadian rhythm comes at a cost. Accessing light during the inactive phase of our circadian rhythm comes at a cost. Being awake during the inactive phase of our circadian rhythm comes at a cost. And once we start to understand how costly this actually is on not just our physical health, but our mental health as well, I think it gives us a lot of incentive to re-examine our life, right? Again, if we're interested in performance, right? If we're interested in paying down illness and injury burden, a very direct path to that is getting control of our circadian health. So what are circadian rhythms? They are mental, physical, and behavioral processes that are happening over the course of a 24-hour cycle.
almost every living thing on Earth has a biological clock. It's this internal timekeeper. And your internal timekeeper is anticipating cues from the environment based on the rotation of the Earth, which is happening over a 24-hour period. And what is directly influenced by this rotation is the light-dark cycle. And our body is anticipating, that light-dark cycle. It's anticipating light. It's anticipating dark. It's anticipating when we're going to be active and when we're winding down. It's anticipating when we're going to put food in our mouth and when we're going to fast. It's anticipating when we're going to be really active and social and when we're going to be, more in solitude and more alone and more quiet, right? So our body is anticipating all of these things. And what I just outlined are kind of the 4 circadian behaviors, that I'm going to go into depth on, why they're important and how to think about them in the context of your life. So what's happened in the modern world is these kind of primal thresholds of nature have become almost blurred, right? Because, again, we have access to light 24/7. So we can work into the wee hours of the morning. We can be social into the wee hours of the morning if we want to, right? But I think what we have to understand that it does come at a cost. And when we think about this misalignment relative to kind of the natural light-dark cycle, it is going to create poor sleep quality, right? I know a lot of folks are like, ooh, I'm really interested in getting sleep. I know there's a connection between my mental, physical, and emotional functioning and the quality and sufficiency of my sleep. Well, one of the direct paths to a quality night's sleep is indeed through these circadian behaviors. Literally, the quality of your sleep is going to be determined really with the behaviors that happen as soon as you wake up in the morning. And I'll get into that. But that's a really important connection to make, is that you cannot address or fix your sleep without fixing your circadian rhythms first. Such an important point that I think is largely missed in this conversation around sleep health, okay? And we're going to talk about how to fix your circadian rhythms, all right? We're going to get into that. That's the big push for today. Depression, mental health, is going to be a consequence of circadian alignment, insulin resistance, and I'm going to talk about the timing of your food, because this is it's important to understand that we are meant to eat the bulk of our calories during the active phase of our circadian rhythm, when we are most insulin sensitive. As the day progresses and once the sun goes down, we become less insulin sensitive, right? So when folks are eating, for 17, hours across the day, that puts a lot of stress and burden on our system. We're just not designed to do that. All right. And I'll get into that. Fatty liver disease, impaired muscle function, right? So when we're asking our body again to, exercise and, maybe take on, heavy volume and intensity from an exercise perspective during the inactive phase, we're just, again, not as primed to, to kind of accept that volume and that intensity during that inactive phase of our circadian rhythm. So timing of exercise becomes really important. And then, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, right? This misalignment of our circadian rhythms is going to manifest in all these kind of physiological and psychological ways that we might not be able to perceive in the moment, but they have this slow, insidious effect on our overall ability to engage with the things that matter to us most. And what is so sneaky about this lack of awareness is that we cannot perceive our own mental, physical, and emotional declines. To me, that when I think about potential and I think about my hope for humanity, I want people to be aware of what it feels like to fire on all cylinders. It's the most amazing feeling to be able to access your potential mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, right? And without this foundation in place, you become slowly untethered, right? Like you create distance between your potential and your reality. And circadian health is one way to close that gap. And so I think it's a really exciting opportunity. And what's so cool about these behaviors, light, sleep-wake behavior, exercise, caffeine, naps, is generally speaking, we have some control over it. And many of these things are literally free. Let's talk about light behavior. So there's a recent paper published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, which is a highly regarded journal, and it showed that high levels of light at night and insufficient daylight during the day significantly impact mortality risk. So high levels of artificial light at night, which again is during the inactive phase of your circadian rhythm, is going to increase mortality risk. Similarly, folks who are not getting enough daylight also have increased mortality risk. So light behavior is something that we need to be very intentional about leveraging. Because again, if we're not thinking about this intentionally, we will adapt to a lower level of functioning without even knowing it. And not to mention, we set ourselves up for increased risk of illness, increased risk of injury. Again, going back to availability, we will decrease the time that we have with our loved ones and spending time on the things that matter to us most, right? So dialing in our light behavior becomes really important. And I will say that, when we think about, okay, what does this actually mean on a practical level? Within 20 minutes of waking up in the morning, we want to get as much natural light as possible. If you're waking up before the sun rises, okay, get as much artificial light as possible, okay? Because a lot of us are not able, because of our schedules, we have to wake up earlier than the natural sunrise. Or maybe we wake up a little bit later. Regardless, you want to make sure that you're getting as much light within 20 minutes of waking up as you can. This will set your circadian rhythm. This gives important information to all of the clocks in the body, okay? You have these cones and rods in your eyes that are non-vision forming. These are specifically to basically perceive light. So in the morning, when you're getting that big douse of natural light, it goes into the retina and then basically goes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is it's located in the hypothalamus in your brain, okay, over the roof of your mouth. And basically that is the control center. That is the master clock. And basically what that's doing is it's creating autonomic innervation. So that refers to the process by which the autonomic nervous system is supplying nerves to internal organs, to smooth muscles and glands, and basically all of the involuntary physiological processes that are taking place, okay? Now, the way we influence the autonomic nervous system is in a positive way, is getting light at the right time. So again, that morning bolus of light is really important to initiate all of these involuntary processes, right? Which, again, increase our robustness, right? When we're matching what our body wants, okay, which is light within 20 minutes of waking up, now all of a sudden, again, we're putting, we're basically, if you can imagine like a gold star. Remember when you were a kid and you used to get gold stars for like different things? Well, this is a gold star for alignment, right? And you want to get as many gold stars across the day toward circadian alignment as possible, because that is going to make your system more robust and resilient, right? So when we talk about, again, availability, okay, viewing light at the right times is really important. And then throughout the day, the extent that you can get as much natural light is going to help your mental health. It's going to affect your mood and your alertness. And again, just your ability to kind of engage in the world, and it will affect your sleep at night. And when we say, good sleep at night starts the moment you wake up, the earlier you view light, the earlier you're going to feel sleepy. The later you view light, the later you're going to feel sleepy. So you can use light to manipulate when you want to feel sleepy. But understand, and the second behavior that I'm going to talk about is sleep-wake consistency, right? Which is so vital. There is a kind of a wealth of evidence emerging that sleep regularity is just as important, if not more important, than duration. And indeed, the degree to which you stabilize when you go to bed and when you wake up, which is sleep regularity and sleep consistency, a term that we use at Whoop to basically define kind of when you're waking up and to quantify when you're waking up and when you're going to bed. And we express that as a percentage. But basically, sleep-wake regularity or sleep-wake consistency predicts all-cause mortality or mortality risk. So we know that that is a really central behavior. But a path to consistent sleep-wake timing is getting that bolus of light in the morning. Okay, because if the bolus of light in the morning that we get is inconsistent, that is, sometimes we're seeing that light at 9 a.m., other times we're seeing it at 5 a.m., the next day it may be at 7, that's going to confuse our clocks. Okay, and I'm going to get back to the cost of confusion in just a second. That's going to confuse our clocks, which means that when we release melatonin at night, the timing of that release is going to be kind of off kilter, okay, or inconsistent, right? Which pulls us further away from this sleep-wake regularity. So path to sleep consistency, which in fact is a path to really restorative, high-quality sleep, is really stabilizing that first bolus of light, trying to make that as consistent as possible. So figure out when you can wake up. Maybe it's 7 a.m., maybe it's 6 a.m., that's the time that you can do on average regularly. And you want to try to minimize the amount of variation between your weekday schedule and your weekend schedule. Okay, lots of variation between your weekday and weekend is called social jet lag. Okay, you don't need to have the symptoms of jet lag and be jet lagged just by travel. Most people are jet lagged, frankly, and have the symptoms of jet lag. Brain fog, low energy, sleepy during the day. And that's a result of these really irregular sleep-wake times. So we want to try to, bottom line, use light to create a consistent sleep-wake schedule. That's kind of the goal, right? And, when you want to be alert, you want maximum light. And this is the basic principle that everyone needs to recognize. If you want to be really alert, maximum light. If you want to be sleepy, okay, maximum darkness. I think it's important to note that as humans, we actually have not adapted to blue light after the sun sets. We have not adapted to blue-rich light after the sun sets. And if you notice the sky in the morning, it's very blue, right? And during the day, it's like that's blue-rich light. And then as the day progresses, it becomes more orangey, right? And these hues in the sky, the spectrum of light is, again, giving information through our retina, okay, to the suprachiasmatic nucleus to tell all of our cells, our tissues and organs what it is that they need to do. Okay, and back to, I made a comment about kind of the confusion of the cells, right? When our cells are getting getting conflicting information, okay, so again, internally, I want one thing, right? Like all the clocks, tissues, organs, like they're expecting and anticipating things to happen at certain times. When I go against that, my cells become confused. Cellular confusion is the basis for injury, illness, and disease, and aging. So if you don't care about those three things and you care about your vanity, it will decrease, it will accelerate your aging. This confusion will accelerate your aging. So one way, again, to have more control over your availability and your performance is to dial in your light behavior, which is going to help you dial in your sleep-wake regularity. Okay, these things are connected. And I think the other thing to recognize is that the degree to which we're seeing, daylight and the degree to which we are kind of watching actually the sun set, it actually will make us less sensitive to light later. And there's just a lot of really great research going on in this area. So it almost like protects us from the artificial light at night when we're getting a lot of daylight exposure. So just another way to think about, okay, how can I mitigate some of the, negative effects of light at night? Well, getting lots of light in the morning and during the day can buffer against that or make you less sensitive. The other thing I want to mention is melatonin. It's a very powerful hormone and is released in the presence of darkness. And again, its role is to signal to your body that it is time for sleep. Now, melatonin is not just, and the only way for this to get released, just to be very clear, is darkness. Okay? And the strength of that melatonin is correlated to how dark the environment is. I think that there's some conflicting evidence as to kind of how soon, when you need to basically initiate that darkness, right, in order to release melatonin. But just know that if your body is outside and looking at the sky during sunset, your melatonin is going to get released around 2.5, 3 hours later, kind of after that moment. Okay, and that's when we're going to feel kind of our biggest pressure for sleep. Again, provided we have some sort of kind of consistent sleep-wake schedule. So melatonin, not just helping you fall asleep, but also has really powerful antioxidant properties. We know that for folks who, there's a relationship between decreased levels of circulating melatonin and increased cancer risk. Okay, so melatonin has anti-cancer properties that are, I think it's important to call out. So if we're kind of putting ourselves in a position where we're not releasing melatonin or, we're not getting as much melatonin as we need, therefore we have less circulating melatonin, yeah, it's going to impair our ability to, to kind of fall asleep and to feel sleepy. But we're also missing out on, this anti-cancer kind of property. So I think it's really important to kind of make that connection. And again, this inconsistent sleep-wake time is going to cause circadian disruption, which is going to cause a reduction in melatonin production. Okay, so you might still release it, but potentially not at the strength that you would if you were keeping your bedtimes regular. And I think there's no coincidence here that there's such a strong relationship between sleep regularity and mortality risk, right? When we look at, the role that melatonin plays, right? So kind of understanding how this all fits together and how it contributes to both mental and physical health is I think really, really critical. When you think about, humans, there's lots of variability across humans. And I never want to come across as I'm saying, talking in a way that we're all the same. We're not, right? Some people are, my mom in particular is very, very sensitive to light. She had a later chronotype because she didn't manage light very well. And was really sensitive to kind of seasons and, especially during the winter, she had really severe seasonal affect disorder. So that really messed with her. And there's a lot of folks who have these, who are really sensitive to light, and that makes you more in danger of kind of some of these circadian rhythm and sleep disorders. So just something to put out there. If you find yourself really sensitive to light, you find yourself, struggling to fall asleep, struggling to kind of align your circadian rhythms, see a doctor. It is, I don't know that there's really any more important investment that you can make in yourself than to get your sleep and your circadian rhythms aligned. Like this is just like, it's so important. Like when you think about your overall mental, physical, emotional, spiritual wellness, like that this is just so foundational, right? This is like the biggest rock, right? So I hope people, you know, think about this in an intentional way and kind of examine your own life and seek help if certainly if you need it. But a lot of these things you can address really on your own. Again, provided you're relatively healthy and you do not have in these sleep or circadian disorders. These are things that you can slowly build into your life and create this alignment.
Today's conversation is sponsored by Whoop, where I work as the global head of human performance principal scientist. Lots of us set resolutions in January, but the best time from a psychological and physiological standpoint is actually in the spring. Because our bodies are wired to respond to environmental cues, variables like daylight increasing and temperatures getting warmer give us a natural uptick in energy, mood, and motivation, creating a very real opportunity to engage in more movement and a stronger routine. With summer nearly here, right now is the time to really get intentional and start training to hit your health goals. Tools like Whoop Coach, trends, and weekly plans will give you insight into what is working and what needs improvement. I'm always looking at my recovery and my heart rate variability trends, or HRV. They're amongst the clearest signals of how well I'm aligning my behaviors with my values. If you'd like to explore your data, visit join.whoop.com/science to try Whoop free for 1 month. That's join.whoop.com/science. I want to take a second to talk about our sponsor, Huel, and one of their products that has been game-changing for me. Most of you listening will know that the food we put in our bodies impacts how we perform. Our energy levels, ability to stay focused, to recover, all of it is dictated by our nutrition. But for many of us, we're short on time, and time is often one of the biggest barriers when it comes to eating well. For me, between my job and launching this podcast, my family, there are days when I feel like I only have minutes to grab something to eat. On those days, I have Huel Black Edition ready to drink. Firstly, because it's a balanced meal with 35 grams of protein and 27 essential vitamins and minerals, and it's low in sugar. Secondly, it tastes like a milkshake, and it's hardly surprising that Huel has sold over 500 million meals. If you've never tried Huel, take this opportunity and get 15% off by visiting my.huel.com/Kristen Holmes and use code Kristen. You'll get a free gift with your first purchase. Terms and conditions in the description.
The other circadian behavior, so light, sleep-wake timing, is time-restricted eating. Okay, and there's some great resources out there. One of my favorites is Dr. Sachin Panda, who talks a lot about time-restricted eating. And one thing that I want to call out that's really important is that time-restricted eating is not intermittent fasting. They're kind of two separate things. And I think it's important to make the distinction because intermittent fasting has, as a dietary strategy, it might be similar to time-restricted eating. There could be a dietary strategy where you're eating for 12 hours and fasting for 12 hours, and that's kind of the circadian time-restricted eating dietary strategy. But then intermittent fasting could also be, reducing calories for 2 days, and then eating normally for 2 days. And there's all different types of ways to think about intermittent fasting as a dietary strategy, whereas time-restricted eating has a circadian component 100% of the time. It is not about restricting calories, has nothing to do with caloric restriction. It's about eating during the daylight hours, very simply. Again, this is free. And there's lots of compelling research that suggests that you can really get very close to your metabolic health goals by literally just consolidating all of your calories into a feeding window during the daylight hours. And it seems like 10 hours, a 10-hour feeding window seems to be the sweet spot based on the literature that I've read. But some folks maybe do better with an 8-hour feeding window or eating window. Some other folks might do better with a 12-hour feeding window. Younger children generally 12 is better. Really active folks, okay, who are doing a ton of volume, a lot of intensity, competitive athletes are going to probably do better with a 12-hour window. Those of us who are just kind of, recreational, working out an hour a day, a half an hour a day, or doing like micro little exercise snacks throughout the day, you can probably get away with an 8 to 10 hour window. The idea is you want to try to create a buffer of time between your last calorie and when you intend to sleep. One of the things that we see in the data that I have access to is that late night meals is one of the big saboteurs of sleep and recovery. So we want to, it seems, again, if we're trying to, do our very best to wake up tomorrow with the most energy that we can have to kind of get closer to our potential and live our values and be available and decrease injury and illness, we want to protect our sleep. And one of the paths to protecting our sleep and aligning our circadian rhythms, which again, the two are related, is giving ourselves that buffer of time between our last calorie and when we intend to sleep. So generally speaking, if you can, within an hour or so, when the sun comes up, when the sun sets, make sure that we're kind of fitting all of our calories in that window. It seems to really, really have pretty outsized benefits in terms of enhancing our metabolic health, aligning our circadian rhythms, and our glucose metabolism. Like all of that seems to benefit from this time-restricted eating, again, which is a dietary strategy that does not imply any caloric restriction, just a consolidated feeding window where we're eating all of our calories and ideally when the sun is up. That is time-restricted eating. Again, it has a circadian component. And finally, exercise and social time. Physical activity serves as a non-photic Zeitgeber, okay? So Zeitgeber is just time giver, right? I haven't used that word specifically, but I've been talking about the timing of things, right? That's just the formal name that has been given by the chronobiologists to help us kind of think about time. I'm pretty sure that has a German root to it. But basically, exercise, again, it's not going via the suprachiasmatic nucleus necessarily, right? We're not getting an input. It's not a light, a photo input. This is just, again, if I'm going for a big run, I'm running up the stairs, whatever it might be, like that is activity, right? That is basically creating kind of a cascade of it really impacts my nervous system, right? My sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, kind of goes online, right? So I'm releasing adrenaline and epinephrine and cortisol basically to kind of meet the demand, right? Generate energy so I can meet that demand of running up the stairs. Well, when that is happening during the inactive phase of my circadian rhythm, again, I am confusing my cells, right? My cells during the inactive phase of my circadian rhythm are ready to wind down, right? My clocks, my peripheral clocks and tissues, like they're, everyone, they need to rest, right? And we need to give our body the requisite time to restore and repair, right? When we do not allow for sufficient time for restoration and reparation, we are going to end up sick, we're going to end up injured, right? It's just inevitable, right? We can get away with it for, a certain amount of time, right? Where we can kind of burn the candle at both ends, but eventually it's going to bite us in the ass, right? It's just the way it is, right? And most of us have spent periods of time in our life where we've been really, really stressed, right? We're kind of running up the stairs constantly. That is the analogy for we are activating our sympathetic nervous system, like pretty much it's on overdrive, right? And we kind of get used to that. And then when we finally have a chance to rest, our body and our immune system in particular, like everything just kind of shuts down. And there's a term for this. It's called the letdown effect. And this is that moment where our system is just like, it lets down, right? We are finally in a position where we're not asking our sympathetic nervous system to be on overdrive. And as the body tries to restore balance, the only way for it to do that is to literally shut down. And that's when you get sick, right? And when you get sick, like you're forced to shut down, right? And I think everything that I'm talking about today and just, for the life of this show is going to be, how do we get into a position where we can break that cycle? Where every day I can kind of wake up and be, close to the best version of myself. And I can be available, and I can live my values with joy and with energy, and repeat that, and not be in a situation where I'm burning the candle at both ends, and then the only way for me to stop is to actually get sick. And I think this is really the opportunity, right? With aligning our light, our sleep-wake time, our meal timing, right? And our exercise and social time with the natural light-dark cycle. And I won't pretend that this is easy, right? Modern life is not at all set up for us to do this. But that's where you just have to decide for yourself, how alert do I want to be during the day? How present and engaged do I want to be for the things that I really care about? And that's really truly the only person who can answer that is you, right? And I'm just telling you that this is potentially a path that can kind of get you closer to that if that's what you want. It doesn't mean that you can't go out and be social, but just understand that the way we're designed as human beings, that will eventually come at a cost. We end up just adapting to a lower level of functioning, right? Just because we can't perceive our own declines doesn't mean it's happening. And what I'm telling you is that if we're constantly bypassing our natural preferences for when we eat, when we sleep, when we're active, it's going to eventually come at a cost. I feel most empowered when I have the information that I need to make a choice. And I think that, largely, if you have the right information, performance is a choice. You can choose your level of performance. To me, there's nothing more energizing and exciting than that, right? And empowering, right? When I understand the lifestyle factors that are going to influence my ability to show up every day. I understand the physiological influences. I understand the psychological influences. And when I understand these influences, I can make a choice. I know that aligning my meal timing with the natural light dark cycle is an upgrade, right? That's going to allow me to show up mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually as a better version of myself. And I can choose that, right? Maybe not every day, because I travel, I have 2 kids, same as you. I got a lot going on, right? And it's not every day is perfect. And that's not the project here. It's about just thinking more strategically about these big rocks that are going to move around our ability to show up and be our best version. And a lot of that creates designing a life that is more aligned with these primal thresholds of nature. And that might be talking to your partner. It might be talking to friends, right? Kind of saying, hey, I'm trying to reorg. I get sick a lot. I get injured a lot. I don't have the energy I want to during the day. And I know that this is a path to that. I'm going to give it a go, right? You are in charge of your life. And I think sometimes we feel like we're just, we have to just go along with whatever is out there. But that is, you don't have to do that. You have the power to choose. And a lot of this is just understanding, what the choices are that are going to allow you to live the life that you want. And that's really what I hope today's session, gives you some insight into this really powerful lever of circadian health, how you can use these behaviors to your advantage, and hopefully, choose performance. I've discovered a game-changing beauty device, and I'm not gatekeeping. It's the red light face mask from this show's partner, Bone Charge. For those who are new to red light therapy or near infrared, it works by penetrating deep into the skin to boost collagen production, reduce inflammation, and smooth fine lines, wrinkles, and scars. I've only used it for a few weeks, but I'm already seeing improved texture and a bit more firmness. These are, just kind of preliminary data, but so far, so good. And what makes it stand out for me is that it's cordless. I can literally make pancakes for my kids
while wearing the mask. What's also unique about Bon Charge that I love is that it has more LEDs than any other brands, offering better coverage and optimized treatments. Check out Bon Charge's face mask or explore the rest of their amazing products to aid your health and wellness journey. Head to boncharge.com/Kristen, and for a sneaky 15% off code, use Kristen at checkout. Discount applies site-wide. You'll also get free shipping and a 1-year warranty. Head to boncharge.com/Kristen now.